Hi guys, Liana here. It's Mountain Monday. You know what to do. Breathe in and out. And breathe in and out. Okay, sorry this video is late this week, guys. I got back from Edmonton, Alberta late last night. Beautiful mountains in Alberta. But I just I couldn't get it together. I feel like I'm fighting off a bit of con plague. You can probably hear it in my voice, but I figured better late than never. Because I thought maybe I'll just skip it for this week, and then I thought no, um, all weeks this is not the week to skip the Zen segment. And Momo is here. So those of you who love Momo, he's sitting on my lap purring. So Momo's very zen right now. But the reason I wanted to make sure I got a Mountain Monday video up this week, even though it's late, is because of I apologize if there's any audio dropouts or anything like that. I'm pretty sure it's my actual capture computer. It's getting a bit old and it can't handle the data. You'd think an i5 processor would be enough. Seems it's not. But that's why there's occasional audio issues in my videos for people who are interested. Oh, Momo left. He was bored. But this week, over the weekend and over the past week, some people were very sincerely frightened by angry too, but frightened as well by the stuff at Google Ideas, where at least one known harasser was part of a think tank about anti-harassment strategies on the internet. And this is confirmed. I'm not throwing shade. I'm not going to spread it. I'm not the best expert. I have had run-ins with this person myself. Um, I've seen the stuff. I think it's undeniable that some of the people chosen are not the best people on this subject. And so people lose faith in institutions they believed to be, on the ball previous to this. And it's upsetting. And I mean, the other point that got people very upset was a very silly UN report on, online harassment. And I'm not saying that the issue of online harassment is silly. I'm saying the approach this paper took to it is silly. And I'm going to deal with that on another day, possibly Tatas Tuesday tomorrow. So I'm not going to get into that here. But I look for signs of fear as opposed to just signs of outrage, because we all know how I feel about outrage. Outrage can get out. But the fear is real, and the fear is that, once again, gamers are being used by a convenient weapon by people who don't understand the internet, and that means that the government is going to come in and regulate the internet as it's doing in some countries like Australia. And that it's going to take away free speech and all this stuff. And what I want to, implore to people is, please don't panic. Okay? Free speech in North America is protected speech for a reason. And it's important to remain vigilant, but we've been down this road before. I think part of the reason that I can kind of stay a little bit chiller than some other people is I'm older than many gamers. I remember the violence stuff in the 1990s, the rise of Jack Thompson, the straw manning of violence, the warping of cultivation theory to claim that violent media causes violence instead of violent media causes a fear of violence. And by using this warped pseudoscience, they tried to limit freedom of expression of video game companies. But the U.S. courts reminded everybody that video games are art and therefore they're protected speech. It's not that anybody denies some horrible things are shown in all mediums, not just games, all media. But it's protected speech. And, that's an important distinction. Now people, again, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The straw man is different. Let's call it a straw woman this time, because let's face it, that's what it is. It's using gender and sexuality um, to try to get games censored again. But now we have precedent in the courts. Now the same principle holds. Video games are art, and so they're free speech. Now, it sucks if you live in Australia. I don't know if it helps, but every time Australia censors a game, the rest of the world laughs at that censorship board because it always seems um, so subjective and so almost random. I mean, it's not random. Anything with an alien anal probe, anything involving some sort of anal penetration, the Australian censor board flips out over. Um, and that's a very interesting thing to get to me. I don't think now is the time to get into the homophobic connotations of that, but I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of prison rape in Australia. Who knows? But there's definitely a bent in what the Australian censorship board filters. And so if you live in those countries, it sucks for gamers in those countries right now. I'll admit it. They get censored versions of video games. They don't get to have the same experience as everyone else. And so I can see how this would be a bigger issue for people living in those countries. The thing that's important to keep in mind with that is video games tend to be canaries in a mine shaft in these situations. They're usually symptoms of much larger problems in society based on the same issues, which means there are a lot of natural allies in the fight against this stuff as long as you play your cards right. And one of the things we're really not good at on the internet so far is understanding that free speech means accepting that people are going to say and do things that you disagree with and you may even find disgusting. But the difference between finding something disgusting and actually hurting someone is what's significant here. You don't have the right to take away another person's freedom to be wrong. And this is the disconnect I'm seeing over and over and over again. And this is sort of the Zen point I want to remind people of. The important thing is that just someone being wrong on a single point doesn't give you the right to call them stupid or any sort of ad hominem insult that I see it bandied around like, no, that's ad hominem, no, that's ad hominem. But the minute, the other quote unquote side does something, we're on the ad hominem attacks over and over and over again. I say we collectively, both, all sides. It's more than one side. But at this point, it's so hard to stay out of the various types of culture wars that neutrality is pretty much a side at this, because it's not neutrality anymore. It's actually saying I agree with parts of both sides, I disagree with parts of both sides, but there are tactical elements going on here that I cannot be a part of. And so I guess the third side is that there are bad tactics, sort of thing. But the thing I that got me into critique of video games, the thing that pushed me towards this thought leader designation that is possibly the best way to describe me. I mean, I've been struggling with this personally a lot. What do I do? What do I call myself? And I guess thought leader is the right thing. I come up with concepts and I come up with ways of expressing those concepts, and then I disseminate those concepts. But the reason I was interested in it is that video games have always been a litmus test for profound unhealthy social bias. I love that video games are on the vanguard of solving these problems, and that makes it a noisy, sometimes very mean place to be, because you're constantly ahead of the curve. You're constantly fighting inertia. You're constantly fighting, the fact that common sense is often neither common nor sense. But, as an example of this, some people are trying to restrict sexual situations in video games. Then we have much more serious issues in society where people like Kim Davis are attempting to personally police gay relationships in defiance of the law. Do I care if Kim Davis personally opposes Homosexuality? No, I really don't care. What I care about is the abuse of power in that situation. That's what I care about, because that's not faith, that's bigotry. Okay. And as a person of faith myself, I get really, really angry personally when people use their religion to leverage their power, which is about as anti-Christian as you can get, to try to force other people to, it's got nothing to do with an ethical perspective and everything to do with the wielding of power. And that's, she actually said, and this is very significant. Whatever you think about gay marriage, that's not the point. We're beyond that now with Kim Davis. And this ties into video games. Kim Davis actually said on a TV interview that dignity isn't a constitutional right. That right there says more about Kim Davis than her religion. Because I know plenty of Christians who do not believe that they have the right to defy the law. Okay. And to me, it's just so ignorant, because there's that whole thing in, enshrined in American law, this thing called the pursuit of happiness that follows life and liberty. And to me, my interpretation of the pursuit of happiness is dignity. When someone, and you see this a lot in these culture wars on both sides, extremists on both sides. I am not trying to call out conservatives on this. No, that's not what I'm doing here, because the left is just as guilty of it. When people are saying on either side, you're taking away an element of my personhood. People in the gay marriage thing said they felt like a person when they were able to get a marriage license, and Kim Davis turned up her nose at that. On the left, in the video game war, you're seeing that a lot as well, that people don't want to be, objectified because of physical things like being a neckbeard. Don't equate us with misogyny. Don't make us subhuman just because of the way we look. And certain people in gaming are turning up their nose at that. That is no different. That is ignoring the fact that we live in a society that believes that dignity is a right. So many of our laws are designed, are engineered around guaranteeing dignity for people, and there being consequences for taking that dignity away. And, the example of, gay marriage and video games, both these things may disgust certain people. Like I said, disgust and harm aren't the same thing. And, my book is the Torah, and in the Torah, what kind of bugs are okay to eat under kosher laws. And eating bugs might seem disgusting to some people nowadays, but it actually won't hurt you. So while, yes, the disgust principle is sort of, back in the day, had some evolutionary benefit where it stopped people from eating poisons or unhealthy things or disease things. We've gone beyond it now. Disgust isn't so much a health thing anymore as it is a sanctity thing, as it is a purity thing, and that's not quite the same thing, right? And it's really important. I know this is a very left-wing position. I know that. But, the most important thing, does something actually cause harm? Does it really? And this is where science is very important. We know that violence in video games doesn't actually make you violent. Therefore, it doesn't actually have social harm. Same thing with gay marriage. We found out here in Canada, we legalized gay marriage very early, and our society didn't descend into anarchy. The institution of marriage didn't fall apart. There was no social harm to gay people getting married, despite what people think. And, hopefully that made sense, and people didn't just get stuck on the whole, I disagree with this point, so your entire argument is invalid. That stuff doesn't help anything. It's very, very frustrating with me. I have to take a few deep breaths when people get on that thing. They focus on the one tiny short sentence or single example that they read too much into and just flip out and instead of asking what I meant by that, they just automatically disagree and think it destroys my entire argument, which it doesn't. May it be the most eloquent example in the world? No, but I do this 5 days a week, guys. I don't exactly have a lot of prep time. So, I'd hope that people try to get the intent of what I'm trying to say and the big picture of what I'm trying to say. But there are a lot of people who just want to find the single thing they can do to debunk what I'm saying. That's debunking and disproving are different things to me. Disproving means you're actually coming in with a neutral perspective. You're seeing the good and the bad, and you're trying to see on the whole whether the argument holds up. Someone trying to debunk something is coming in intent on finding something wrong with it. And so they stretch, like trying to make Princess Peach some horrible affront to women. That's a stretch to me. Okay, plenty of little girls wear pink dresses and grow up and are very successful in business and do very, very well for themselves and live very, very happy lives. The color pink is not our enemy because it's arbitrarily decided to be a feminine signifier in our culture. The entire idea that someone having feminine characteristics, other feminine attributes is bad is a fear and hatred of the feminine. It is misogyny. This is what kills me about sex negative feminism. But I want to get on to another issue which has come up in this, and I think this is the right segment to do it because this is all about sort of finding equilibrium. And the intent of Mountain Mondays is to try to make these issues we're all struggling with a little easier for people to deal with, to bring the heat down and sort of find a centering point and assure people that, yes, it is frustrating, but it's not the end of the world and we can't catastrophize this stuff and there is hope. That's why I do it on Monday, because the weekends are always insane on social networks. And so I try to sort of bring things back into alignment. One of the things that I've seen going around the internet that I want to deal with because it's important is this idea of whether or not calling someone a liar is harassment or cyber violence. I think we can all agree that calling someone a liar is not violence. Now, whether it's assault and this is the problem of words meaning different things in different places, at least where I'm in. And you got to remember that the speaker, and I'm not going to say the name because I think this person has way too much power in video games, so I'm going to address the idea, not the person. But if you spend any time in Canada and our laws become normalized, our assault and battery laws, the assault part is actually verbal stuff, threats of violence, things like that. Assault actually is verbal in our definition. Whether you think that's stupid or not, it doesn't matter. By the jargon of our courts, assault is verbal. Battery is actually physical, what some people would call assault. Okay? So there may be a semantics issue here. But the question of whether or not someone is a liar is harassment is quite interesting. And I actually looked this up because I've had issues when I was on talk radio. I was hauled into the program directors for calling our prime minister a bully. Apparently, I'm supposed to say that he's acting like a bully, not that he is a bully. Now, I disagree with this distinction, but it wasn't up to me. I got in trouble. So I'm like, all right, this is not as simple a thing one way or the other, right? And so I looked it up, and there are certain situations that there's case law. There are some situations where it's okay to call someone a liar or accuse someone of lying because hyperbolic speech comes with the territory, and they actually cited talk radio. So I was right, but maybe it's different between the US and Canada. Again, different laws. But you know, if someone's just talking and they're actually not citing any provable facts, then apparently it's not defamatory. So, people are right. Now, if people actually know for a fact that the person is not lying and they keep calling them a liar anyway, that is defamation. So there's some gray area there that I just wanted to let people know, because the reality is this is sort of a hearts and minds fight. So there's an element of PR in what we're doing. And so we kind of have to be careful not to give the people that want to censor and shut down video games, the people that want to turn video games into a convenient enemy, we've got to be careful not to give them easy ammo. Because these guys, right? They'll spread things on PowerPoint presentations and they'll retweet them and they'll take things out of context and they'll make us look like the freaking boogeyman because it benefits them financially. We know it's not true, but they're using anecdotal evidence that could be third-party trolls. It could be somebody just having a bad day. It could be somebody that just made a mistake and this doesn't actually represent their views. We don't know. And so personally, I think that we just have to be careful not to give these naysayers too much ammunition to use against us. And I don't want to make anybody feel bad for getting frustrated and saying something they might later regret. We're all human. We all do that, okay? I'm saying I understand. It's just, if we can minimize it, it's better. Not that people having natural human reactions is bad. I hope that distinction makes sense. Because the reality is there's another side to free speech. And that's, trust me, I know this. I told you this whole thing. I got on air for speaking my mind. Speaking your mind has consequences, especially when it's unpopular speech. And I'm not saying this as somebody who's never been dogpiled for unpopular speech. It's happened again and again and again and again and again. And, we're dealing with the fact that right now there are a few popular girls, I'm going back to this high school metaphor kind of, because it is. This entire shitstorm is high school. And recognizing that, I find, keeps it in perspective for me. I don't know if it helps you, but it helps me. But where there's a few popular girls who are on very precarious pedestals right now, and it's unpopular to criticize them. Now, I emphasize for now, okay? These paradigm shifts, these wheels turn incredibly fast. The media loves to build people up as heroes so they can then write a fallen hero narrative, because eventually it gets boring to write about how wonderful someone is and the media brings them down. It's what happens. And then, sometimes you get a third arc that's a redemption story. But the media loves to build people up to bring them down. I've seen it again and again and again. When I used, there was all this, they'd build up this pop princess or this boy band, and then they'd savage them. And then they'd cover the comeback. And it's just the churn. Newspapers and media outlets have to write interesting things. I'm not even aware they're doing this, but it is cyclical and it can be observed. But right now it's unpopular to criticize certain people. And we're seeing the consequences of this unpopular speech. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences from speech. So I've always been prepared to accept that element of, having an unpopular viewpoint at the moment. Now, I do draw the line at people saying that it's okay to lie about me because I criticized a certain person. That means they know they're lying and they're doing it anyway, which is defamatory. They're basically saying it's okay to commit defamation and the law is against them on that. Now, this is where we get into privilege, that we're dealing with people with a lot more money than us. And so suing them really isn't an option because they have more resources than we do. Is it fair? No. Is it reality? Yes. Now, there is hope. There is a way out of this because, like I've said, I've seen this pattern repeat itself in media over and over and over again. Okay? Gaming's down right now, but the media loves a comeback story. So it will cover the comeback. Okay? Some people are riding really high right now, but the media loves a fallen hero story. So that crash is going to be just as documented as the rise. So what I'd like to suggest to people, and it's just a suggestion, not telling anybody what to do, is I believe a really powerful tool in combating the negative narrative against gaming right now, and the idea that the internet is a uniquely dangerous place. I believe it's to rise above it. Okay? The only thing we can be responsible for is our own personal behavior, and that's where we start. We can point out flaws and ideas without attacking people. We can dislike a person intensely and still believe what was done to them in a given situation was wrong, right? Two wrongs don't make a right. We can do these things. We can say these things. There are people who I don't even know them personally, but I've seen their impact on the gaming industry, and I think it's very negative. But I've seen things done to these very same people that I think go beyond the bounds of fair criticism. I'm willing to say so. That's what I mean. Okay? It's amazing how powerful this is over time. It's slow. It's not going in there with dynamite and blasting a hole in a mountain. It's the flow of water that gradually wears, land away, and we end up with the Grand Canyon. But what's a more permanent change? The Grand Canyon, right? It's going to be incremental, guys. It's going to be slow, but it is going to get better. And so I know you're, and in some places, it's a more legitimate concern than others. I want to validate that. And, I know you're scared that some government body is going to take away the products you use as a lifeline. And I know what it's like to feel alone and miserable and to not have a friend in the world except for Super Mario 3. That game has a very special place in my mind and heart because of the place I was in when I was playing that game many, many moons ago. But I want to tell people from the outside, because I just came back from a convention, and gaming was loud and proud, and people were not embarrassed to be gamers. Nobody I was around took digs at being gamers. Gaming was seen as a positive thing. Cosplayers were gamers. Celebrity guests were gamers. I did a Q&A with Brian O'Halloran, Dante from Clerks, and he said the words unprovoked, gaming saved my life. And he said tabletop RPGs, like tabletop gaming and video games, saved my life in a very dark period. He was talking about when he was a kid and his father passed away. And it turned out it was actually his gaming group that encouraged him to go back to auditioning and keep at it with being an actor. And we all know how that turned out, which is pretty amazing. It's an incredible story. But that experience and the fact that, yes, I wasn't at every panel and and people have tried to debunk my experience where I didn't hear a single negative thing about video games all weekend. And this wasn't a small show. This was one of those big pop culture expos where people brought their kids and entire families dressed up like Guardians of the Galaxy and things like that. It was a very mainstream show. There was something like 50,000 people there. And gaming was a positive thing there. Okay, there was none of this culture war there. It was just gaming was seen as fun and something that was good and something that wasn't an issue. I mean, there were women dressed up like Spyro the Dragon, not from Skylanders, Spyro before Skylanders, things like that. There were devoted, dedicated, real deal gamers. I got to talk to Jessica Nigri, the famous cosplayer. She's a gamer. One of her favorite games is Gears of War 3. We had a whole nerd moment about how awesome it was and started quoting lines from the game. It was fabulous. And, every single cosplayer in the pro cosplayer panel was a gamer. And there were 4 women other than me on that stage and 1 guy. So it's not what this very vocal minority is trying to make you think it is. Gaming is a lot stronger and a lot more socially accepted than it seems if you get all your information and all your interactions on the internet. And I wanted to let people know that. And some people are too scared to believe me, and that's fine. But I have seen an uptick in negativity. I have seen an uptick in leveled against me personally, hence it being a personal attack. What I mean is that it's coming at me again instead of it just being other people, and I've seen people make accusations because they're scared that aren't true. And they know they're not true if they stop and think about it for a minute. And so I just want to caution people that, it's not that you say something like that and then can't take it back. You can say, look, I was wrong. I apologize. You're right. The one thing that people keep trying to fling at me, and this is one of these things where I'm like, I don't want to go so far as to call it harassment, but I will say it's not one person, not one opinion. It's not an organic consensus where 500 people get upset about the same thing on their own and decide to bombard me with it. This is a cultivated opinion based on certain message boards, and the cultivated opinion that I'm talking about is this very silly idea that I can't handle any criticism. And yeah, I apologize for laughing. I don't want, because there are people that legitimately believe this, and I shouldn't laugh at them. But when I think about, I just said, people have said it's okay to lie about me because I criticize Anita Sarkeesian. If I couldn't handle criticism, that sort of thing would destroy me, guys. So I apologize for laughing. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but the accusation is patently absurd. If I couldn't handle criticism, I would have jumped on the outrage warrior bandwagon and joined sort of the anti faction of many things a long time ago. Because guess what? Because of my gender, it's sort of a natural fit if I want to be shielded from criticism as opposed to being judged by my merits and sort of get down where the work needs to be done and where I can do the most good. My path, my positioning would have been totally different if I couldn't handle criticism. And unfortunately, when you reach a certain point in public awareness, people start using you as a mirror to themselves, and they tend to put their own insecurities onto you. And it's really funny because I have these exchanges with people where there's one the other day where it was like, you can't handle any criticism. Why do you only see the negative in everything? They freaked out on me. And I said, your group keeps saying this about me. And every time you do, you look like fools because there's so much evidence to the contrary. Oh, now you're insulting me, was the response. Who in that exchange can't handle criticism? Me, who said every time you do this, you look like fools because there's evidence against it? Or the person that just went, oh, now choose for yourself, okay? But the reality is, I have a strength of conviction that allows me to keep going even when things like that happen. And if I was a person who couldn't handle criticism, I would have blocked that person. Instead, I told them to just settle down, like calm down, talk to me later. I'm not dealing with this right now because this is not based in reality. And I think we do need to calm everything down, which is why I continue to do this. And I think that things are too heated in certain areas of video game discussion. I think there's too much fear, which is never useful. And I think that certain things, when something ends up in a UN report, I get it. If you're not aware of the fact that the UN generates probably thousands of reports a year, and most of them are not implemented in the slightest. And then even the UN can only provide influence and pressure. They cannot force a country to change their laws. And this is very important to keep in mind. The UN has been incredibly unsuccessful in dealing with much more serious problems than video games. Now, does that mean we shouldn't look at this study for academic interest? No. We should absolutely say right and wrong. But that's tomorrow, and so I'm going to wrap now. Okay, everybody ready? Breathe in. And out. Breathe in. And out. Okay, I promise, guys, it will get better.